In the late hours of a January night in Buenos Aires, a dashing, driven Argentine prosecutor was found dead in his apartment, bullet to the head. It was the day before he was to publicly present his evidence that the country's president, Cristina Kirchner, had secretly conspired with Iran to cover up Iran's involvement in Argentina's worst terrorist attack 20 years ago. It immediately became an international whodunit, in great part because of the key players, a hard-charging, high-profile prosecutor and a fiery, populist president with a penchant for high drama. What everyone wants to know is, was it murder? Was the government somehow involved? Or was it suicide? Forensic teams scoured the crime scene for clues. Only the victim's DNA was found. His name was Alberto Nisman, 51, a father of two. He was a prosecutor with 10 bodyguards and a long list of enemies. In the days before his death, he had grown worried for his and his family's safety. Just hours before he died, he asked Diego Lagomarcino, a tech worker in his office, to loan him his gun. So as far as we know, you were the last person who saw Nisman one day before he died. Did he say why he wanted the weapon?
He told me, do you know how it feels that your daughters don't want to be with you because they're afraid that something will happen to them by being next to you? I had never seen Nisman so concerned.
Didn't you say to him, why do you need a gun? You have 10 bodyguards.
Yes, that's the first thing I asked him. And he answered, because I don't trust my bodyguards.
Sunday morning, January 18th. Nisman is up in his apartment, here up on the 13th floor. But things aren't quite right. He doesn't respond to repeated phone calls from his bodyguards. We know from the coroner that he died around 3 p.m. in his bathroom, his body slumped against the door. He had been struck by a bullet at point-blank range above his right ear. Did it enter your mind at all, ever, in being with him, that he might use this weapon on himself?
No.
No sense that he was going to kill himself?
No.
Do you think he did commit suicide?
I don't know.
It looked like a suicide, but there was no note and no gunpowder residue on Alberto Nisman's hands. And a forensics team hired by his ex-wife ruled it a murder. It's a mystery with roots going back 20 years to this crime. The suicide bombing of AMIA, the Buenos Aires Jewish Community Center, that killed 85, burying them under the rubble. It was the worst terror attack in this country's history. It was long believed that Hezbollah operatives carried it out. But who sent them? After 10 years with no answer, Alberto Nisman was named special prosecutor in 2004 to find out.
He believed in it as a mission. He always thought that through justice you can defeat terrorism.
Gustavo Perednik, a close friend who wrote a book about the case, said that Nisman, after investigating for 2 years, charged Iran with ordering and financing the attack. I mean, he went right to the very top of Iran and accused the topmost people of approving the bombing.
And thanks to him, they have to be in Iran all the time, because if they leave Iran, the Interpol can look for them.
That's because Interpol issued red alerts, the equivalent of arrest warrants, to several high-ranking Iranians, including the defense minister. Alberto Nisman would spend the rest of his life trying in vain to get them into an Argentine court. So he was stunned when 2 years ago his country's foreign minister signed a memorandum with Iran in which the two countries agreed to interrogate the accused officials together.
The memorandum itself is a joke, because it meant basically that Argentina had to give to Iran all the results of its investigation against Iran for the Iranians to check. That was absurd.
Prosecutor Nisman felt betrayed, saying this was negotiating with the terrorists responsible for the attack. He saw it as part of the government's tilt toward anti-Western regimes shepherded by the foreign minister, Hector Timerman, who agreed to talk to us at the foreign ministry. There's been a lot said about your government shifting policy, foreign policy, away from the United States.
Why do you think that an alliance with the United States is the only way a country can have a foreign policy? We have an independent foreign policy.
Independent of the United States.
Independent foreign policy.
But you used to be very close to the United States, and that is no longer the case.
I don't think it is so good to be close to anybody.
Problem is, Alberto Nisman was close to the Americans and stayed close. According to leaked State Department cables, Washington was always pressuring him to keep the focus on Iran. Do you agree with those who say that Mr. Nisman was a puppet of the United States and the CIA?
Well, puppet is a very strong word to use by a foreign minister.
Under the sway of?
Mr. Nisman used to go to the American embassy here in Argentina and tell in advance what he was going to do.
Do you know if Mr. Nisman was about to lose his job? Was he going to be fired?
No, he was not going to lose his job.
You've read these speculations.
That was a speculation in the media, but there was no way that we ever discussed taking the job away from Mr. Nisman.
To this day, the case of the bombing of the Jewish Community Center remains unadjudicated, the evidence gathering dust in a giant warehouse in downtown Buenos Aires. Over 500,000 yellowing documents, folders, audio cassettes. And now Argentina has a new mystery because 2 months ago, Prosecutor Nisman went on television with an explosive accusation.
La presidenta Cristina Fernández de Kirchner.
That President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner and her foreign minister had negotiated a secret deal with Iran to improve trade in exchange for dropping those red alerts. Perednik said Nisman saw this as colluding with the enemy.
This time he said, I'm going to put them in jail.
I'm going to put them in jail.
And them is the president and the foreign minister.
But 4 days after his accusation, Nisman was dead. President Kirchner, not one to hold back, immediately took to Facebook to suggest it was suicide, then abruptly backtracked and called it murder. People took to the streets in protest, calling for justice. Polls show a majority here think he was assassinated, and the president's opponents think she had a hand in it. This country has a history of assassinations. For years, under military dictatorship, political rivals simply disappeared. But Argentinians thought they had put that behind them. I've heard people talk about Argentina being drawn back into its dark past.
No.
Assassinations.
No. It's impossible. We're talking about things that were terrible, terrible.
One of the great mysteries is whether Mr. Nisman killed himself or whether he was murdered. So what do you think?
That I am part of that mystery. I don't know.
He's part of the mystery because he was one of Nisman's targets. The day after he died, the prosecutor was scheduled to appear before Congress to publicly present a 300-page report backing up his charges. He said that you, in 2011, met in Syria with your Iranian counterpart. He said that you said, and this is a quote in the report, Argentina is no longer interested in solving the attack, the bombing here. It prefers to improve its trade relations with Iran.
Well, that's a lie. That's a total lie. I never said that. Mr. Nisman never showed any evidence that I said that.
He didn't have that on tape or anything like that.
He cannot have something in tape because I didn't say it.
Nisman says that you offered to lift the red alerts.
That is, it's totally logic. I mean, you have to read the law. The only one who can cancel the red notice is a judge. So, I cannot lift the red alerts, okay? I am not allowed.
You could not make a deal to, you could not promise to.
I cannot do it.
So is it possible that the prosecutor's charge against the president and foreign minister was without merit? In an evidence room stacked 2 stories high with investigation documents, we met the Argentine judge who issued those original red alert arrest warrants. You were the judge who made the request of Interpol to arrest these people, those red alerts.
Yes.
Did this government ever ask you to ask Interpol to lift the red alerts?
No, never.
Never.
No government, no person, nobody.
It seems Interpol never got a request to lift the arrest warrants from anyone. 2 days after Nisman made his accusation, the former head of Interpol sent this letter to the foreign minister affirming that the government was 100% committed that the red alerts remain in effect. So 180 degrees from what Nisman
and I read
said.
that in public.
How could such a seasoned prosecutor make such a huge mistake? President Kirchner speculated that her enemies fed Nisman the erroneous information, then killed him, hoping she would get blamed. She pointed, for example, to the man who gave him the gun. So the president named you as someone suspicious in this case. She says that you're an agent of the opposition.
No.
Here are some of the rumors we've heard about you. That you're a spy.
No soy un espía.
I am not a spy.
That you're an agent for a foreign government. Iran, Israel.
No.
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 We haven't seen any evidence to back up the president's charges about Lago Marcino. A more credible target is this man, Jaime Stuzzo, a powerful and shadowy spy master who was Nisman's main source for years. One theory is that Stuzzo concocted the accusation against the president in revenge after she fired him.
Stuzzo was fired the end of December.
Right.
And 14 days later, Mr. Nisman accused the president and myself. And
you see a connection there.
Oh, yes.
The foreign minister suggests that the spy master manipulated Nisman into coming out with a sensational indictment against the Argentine government before the details could be verified. Those who believe it was suicide think the prosecutor came to realize he had been duped and snapped. Is it possible in your mind that he thought to himself, oh my, I got this terribly wrong, and now I don't want to be embarrassed and have to testify publicly? Is that in your head?
I cannot imagine what can go through the mind of a person like Nisman. And I don't want to speculate because the man is dead, he cannot defend himself, and so I will not speculate on what happened with him.
There's a new building and memorial at the site of the 1994 AMIA bombing, a crime the prosecutor dedicated the last 10 years of his life to. Now that he's gone, the families of the victims fear they will never have justice. At the Jewish cemetery in Buenos Aires, Luis Chichesky visits the grave of his daughter Paula often. Just steps away is a fresh grave, that of Alberto Nisman.